Hello, everybody. This is Dominic Jacoki with Windmill Studios. You might recognize me from the Silver Screens and Politics podcast, but today we're doing something a little bit different. I have Jörg Tittel with me, and we're going to have a little discussion today about Jörg's career, his life, his art, everything. How are you doing today?
Hello. I'm good. Thanks, Dominic. We're doing fantastically well here, speaking of politics. In the UK, we have a government that has pretty much collapsed overnight. Not that it was functioning for the last 2 years. And Brexit is our own version of the wall that you guys will or will not build over on your end. So it's all pretty crazy. And I don't know, we sort of like roll with the punches and see where it takes us next. But it's a very interesting time to be alive.
Yeah, for posterity's sake, this is recorded on January 16th, so the no confidence vote in Theresa May just happened.
Well, it didn't happen. She did survive it.
Right, so she survived it, but the vote happened, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she survived it by just a few votes. So basically, yeah, everyone is confident in the fact that they have no confidence in anything, and they might as well go for the lesser of two morons.
Awesome. That sounds like a great time. It's just as fun over here with just government in limbo.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, great again.
So, Jörg, you are a lot of things. You are a director, you're an author, you're a game designer, you're a lot.
Yeah, I'm a jack of all trades, and certainly a master of none.
Yeah, let's run down a little bit for people. You've directed a film called The White King. You've written a graphic novel.
I co-directed The White King with my wife, actually.
Right. And then you co-wrote or just...
I did do some things on my own. Ricky Rouse Has, the graphic novel I wrote by myself, and I worked with a fantastic artist called John Aggs on it because my stick figures would have been really ugly, and I don't think anyone would have bought the book. So
I can relate with that.
Yeah.
And then other than that, you've worked on the Minority Report video game for the movie, Alone in the Dark, the movie. You worked on games like Illbleed. I'm fascinated by this because I feel like most artists don't really go in too many lanes. They kind of stay on their one lane. Like Spielberg will just direct movies, and maybe he'll write, maybe he'll direct the game occasionally, but he's just in movies, you know? Well,
but it's not entirely fair because Spielberg, for instance, at some point, I remember when he was involved with EA, I think was it called EA Partners, or what was it called back then? And I remember he did Boom Blocks.
Yep, and then he did that directing game in like the 90s.
Yeah, I did this game called The Dig or something like that? Yeah, so he's done that. That's true. He hasn't. But I mean, there was no reason for Spielberg to do anything else because like his first, almost right out of the gates, like the first thing that he did was so massively successul in the film medium. It would have been silly for him to suddenly decide to make experimental theater or something instead. But also he happens to be a really, really good filmmaker and a great director. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, but there's plenty of people. There's I think J.J. Abrams is quite impressive in how he's both obviously a very skilled film director, but also a producer for others, and also has been really quite skilled at working cross media and actually recruiting or partnering up at the very least with people who make video games or VR experience and other things around stuff. So it's like I think ultimately if you're into telling stories and entertaining people, and then it would be silly in the modern digital world to limit yourself to just one medium.
Do you think it helps your creative experience? Just you've done stage, so does that stage then inform how you do your films? Does that inform how you do your graphic novel writing? Does that all kind of correlate together?
Absolutely. I think they're all just a different canvas in a way. I mean, I love the stage. And this is with my wife Alex that we've done the most successful work, and she's very, very passionate about theater. And we've done a West End show, for instance, a few years ago, which I produced based on Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises, or Fiesta, as it's known to some, his first novel. And Alex adapted it into an amazing show with live jazz and wine cascading from the ceiling and sex on stage and other cool stuff. And that was on the West End here. It was simulated sex, but yeah, it's
theater. You never know.
Oh, you never know. I mean, there's some real chemistry between the actors, I'm sure. And it made the Times reviewer cringe, which made me very happy because anything to make Rupert Murdoch's minions cringe is good to me. then yeah, so theater is a great thing because you get to you have that live immediate relationship with an audience, and every night is different. In a way, video games are similar in the sense that you more or less virtually, but you get everyone plays a game differently, so you get a completely different response, which in a way makes games closer to theater than to movies, where you have absolutely no control over what kind of environment they might be seeing it in, and whether they watch it on their iPhone or on a big screen with bad sound, they can have a completely different experience. So, which in a sense makes one feel even more vulnerable, and like you have even less control than let's say in the theater space. So it's like they're all completely different, but they're all ultimately all about sharing a story or sharing your experience, your thoughts, your dreams with as wide an audience as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about a few weeks ago, I think, about how theater and gaming is so similar in that, like, theater is not known for being interactive, but it totally is. Like, you go there, you're an audience member, you're part of it just as much as they're there with you, the actors and everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a way, the thing that and the thing that married that in me in a way, when I was studying at NYU Tisch School of the Arts, and I was a theater major there, I was paying for my studies by being a video game journalist. So I was working for Next Generation magazine, which no longer exists in the States. That was the sister mag of Edge magazine, which still exists and is this wonderful mag here, and game magazine here in the UK. And I was working for Official Dreamcast magazine in the US, and later on Official Xbox, and a bunch of other Famitsu in Japan and others, and for me it felt completely natural to go from a sort of rehearsal space during the day to firing up my Dreamcast at night, and then and playing Toy Commander or whatever it was. So it felt natural to me. They were both they were creative spaces that I could explore and create dialogue. Whereas and the cool thing about video games, you can enter into a real dialogue with the people that made the game, and if you're on stage, you can have a real dialogue with the people who are watching you and responding to whatever you're doing on there. Not to mention the other actors on stage with you. So they're really quite similar in a way.
Yeah, I wanted to talk more about your early days doing like freelance journalism, I guess you would say.
Yes.
In the late 90s, because I feel like that's like a time that's totally alien to me, but I love that gaming sector so much.
Oh, dude, it was an amazing time because I guess it was the closest. I think it was the 60s, the equivalent of the 60s or golden 70s to what in cinema for games, because I was sort of there observing and hanging out with a lot of the founding members of Rockstar Games at the time, and and all the legends about them are true. I mean, because those guys decided very early on that they would be true to their name, and they were. And they decided that they would take games out of the nerdy, so to speak, confines of that games had hitherto been known for, and they decided that it would be about truly affecting culture and being part of popular culture and creating popular culture. And so I remember I would be invited to club nights where no one had even seen or played a Rockstar game yet, and all there was a sticker with stickers with the R and Star logo being handed out, and their rule was not to have a single joypad anywhere within eyesight. It was all about having the wildest, coolest party in town. And so gradually people associated the brand with cool and with which they genuinely understood, because I mean it's hard to argue with the fact that Grand Theft Auto has been a game changer, literally, culturally, and one might disagree perhaps with its impact on people's morals and blah blah blah, but it certainly was an impressive punk sort of coup d'etat on the game industry, which has paid off very nicely for them.
It's an exciting time, I'm sure. Like I'm jealous I wasn't there, kind of, except for the parties. I'm not a big party person, but I was trying to find some samples of your writing back then. And it's sad how like magazines and stuff that aren't really that well preserved, especially online.
Yeah, I'm not sure you can find any of my stuff online. Can you?
I found your preview for Illbleed, funny enough, on an official Dreamcast magazine.
Oh, funny.
And I also found a really interesting pull quote. I think it was in issue 8, where you were talking about Jet Grind Radio and how it's probably the most exciting title since Nights on Saturn.
Yeah, well, yeah, it certainly was. Dude, it was such an incredible game, wasn't it?
Oh, I love it, especially the sequel.
Future was gorgeous. No, it was such a stunning title, and I mean, you know, there are a few experiences that have really truly marked me as a sort of gamer, but I think there was definitely one of them. But the Dreamcast had so many great games. Like, I mean, Choo Choo Rocket was just so much fun, and it's the first thing I ever really truly played online with other people. I mean, because you had to have that horrible dial-up connection thing that you sort of plugged into the back of your Dreamcast, but it kind of worked. And of course, there was a delay, but the way Choo Choo Rocket was designed, it didn't matter if there was a delay because it was real time, but not. And it had the coolest ever commercial for it as well. Did you ever watch the?
I've never seen that one.
It has the catchiest tune ever, and hopefully you can find it on YouTube.
Oh God, I'll link that.
Choo choo rocket, me, choo choo rocket. It was incredible. It was a 2D hand animated ant, and Sega was just so proud to be weird and different. And I loved them for it. You know, it didn't necessarily translate to sales.
Oh no.
But that, and then you had things like Panzer Dragoon, which I now hear a Polish developer is doing a remaster or a remake.
Something, yeah. But they're the people who worked on that last Fear Effect game. Which, if you see anything about that,
no.
Sedna, I think it came out last year. It got like terrible reviews.
Well, who knows? I mean, you know, sometimes it's easier to do an HD remaster, which I think they're working on, than to create something from scratch. So I wouldn't write someone off. Also, if this developer has that was their first title or known title anyway, who knows where they're going to go next? So
that's true. That's totally true.
Let's be open-minded and support them in what they're doing and be positive, and hopefully they'll come up with something awesome. I would absolutely hate for them to butcher it. I might as well at this point embrace the fact that they're doing it and wish them well, because I mean there've been so many great HD remasters recently. Anyway, like whether you take a look at the Spiral one was lovely. What they did with Crash Bandicoot has been quite impressive. You know, it was Shadow of the Colossus was great in HD. I imagine, you know, if they do something remotely as good as those, then I think we'd be very happy.
Yeah, that's the thing. Making games is hard. Making games is very difficult, and it's you have to have hope that the magic's going to work.
Yes. It's incredibly difficult. I mean, like we have, my wife and I, we've now been working together and had been married together and have had kids and everything for 10 years or so, and everything is challenging. Of course, it's very difficult to make a successful piece of anything, raise happy, successful, hopefully in the future, kids, and build a good wholesale and all that kind of stuff. It's difficult. There's so many factors that can make or break something. So I have a tremendous respect, and it took me a while to get there, for anyone who gets anything off the ground.
Oh yeah.
And I really genuinely don't think there are, I don't call things bad anymore. I really don't. And I like to see good things in even the quote unquote worst film. I mean, for instance, for some reason I've been, I'm doing this thing at Sony Pictures tomorrow, and I've been sort of looking at films that are coming out on the Sony Movie channel next month, and one of those is what's it called, Reign of Fire, the sort of Christian Bale movie.
Oh, yeah, that thing.
Yeah, but I remember like really enjoying that when I saw that. I mean, I knew it wasn't a quote unquote great movie or sort of masterpiece of any kind, but I thought it was fresh. It was like a sort of weird dystopian London,
right.
Dragons and a completely over-the-top Gerard Butler and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I enjoyed it. And then you look at all these reviews now on that survived, because you talked about a lot of past articles no longer being online. And so you only have, so Rotten Tomatoes is this weird reality now where you have this, only the reviews that survived or that new bloggers have created create a sort of new rating for what actually at the time was actually a very positively received film. and now it has like 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm like, no, that's not what it was. That's not how it was received back then. It was really quite fun, and it was crazy, and it was kind of ambitious and mad. Yeah.
I was saying, if you look like the Metacritic, like those are more like of the time, but if you look at those like poll quotes that they have, that's all that's left a lot of those reviews. It's just like one sentence that maybe describes kind of what those people wanted to say, but maybe not.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so weird. We're living in this strange binary society now, where and contextless society where everyone is encouraged to have an opinion, even though it will probably be used against you down the road by some weird trolling faction on the internet to be used down the road. But everyone is a critic, and people watch things in order to decide whether they like or dislike them, which is really weird, because if I had ever watched films like that as a kid, then I wouldn't be making movies today. Like, if I thought that the only reason for watching something is to decide whether it's good or bad, then what will be the point of making anything new? It's like instead of like engaging in a sort of dialogue and a conversation with someone else who has created something and is sharing a story with you, and if you love a story in particular, then you will watch it again, and then you'll spread the word. So it wasn't about like, oh, what's this thing last night? I gave it 3 out of 7. It's like what's the point? What's the point? It's boring to rate stuff, and now we start rating people as well, which is even more depressing. But yeah, so it was a cool time in the '90s, I have to say, for that kind of stuff.
But yeah,
because
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
No, I can't wait to talk about Alone in the Dark. Speaking of Rotten Tomatoes, we'll get to that.
Yes, I wanted to first talk about Illbleed, because I know you as Jörg from Illbleed, best character in the game probably, and I was interested in because you had written a preview for the game in the official Dreamcast magazine, and then like a few months later you end up being in the game.
Yeah.
Illbleed, for people who don't know, is this survival horror kind of surreal experience on Dreamcast only. About a girl named Eriko who has to go to this what is called a virtual horror land, Illbleed. And she has to save her friends through all these different levels that are based on like gaming tropes, movie tropes. And it just gets more surreal and weird as each level goes on. At the end, you're basically facing off like parodies of Toy Story and Sonic the Hedgehog. It's amazing. And you're in there,
Yes, yeah, I am in there. It was an amazing experience. It was because I really when I saw the first glimpse of it somewhere on the Japanese corners of the internet, I just felt like I really wanted to cover that for official Dreamcast magazine, because it just looked completely insane and in a good way. And truly independent in spirit. And so I thought, I should approach those guys, and which I did via Sega at the time. And then they, Nishigaki-san, who sadly is no longer with us.
That's the worst part of it, honestly. He's not around anymore to make games like that.
Yeah, he was the producer, the founder of Crazy Games. Well, originally they were called the Climax Graphics. And then there was another Climax Entertainment at the time, and so they changed their name. And he said like, well, I don't want to do this interview remotely or anything. I'm coming over. And so,
wow.
And he didn't speak. He barely spoke a word of English. Very, very little. And so it was him. He came over and had a translator, and we spent the most amazing time in New York together. We spent like a whole 2 days just talking and smoking and cigarettes. No drugs were consumed.
Sure.
I no longer smoke, but I remember. But back then, I don't think I can recall a single person who worked at Sega who wasn't chain smoking all the time. And just talking games and talking Illbleed via translator, and then suddenly I started speaking some sort of weird mishmash of whatever Japanese I could muster and whatever English he could muster, and then we went to amazing steakhouses, and later on he ended up actually opening one in Japan, because he was a massive steak aficionado. And steak in Japan is very expensive, so he then later on opened a steak restaurant as well. He was an amazing guy. Sadly, he's no longer with us, as I said. But the game was just completely batshit, and And then I was very surprised at something because he knew that I was an acting student at NYU, and he then suddenly said that we wanted to honor your friendship through we've created a character for you to be and to play, and we've partly named him after you as well.
Wow. I was going to ask, like that. Sorry.
No, sorry. It was incredible. It was completely crazy, and so we went to ended up recording the VO stuff in San Diego. And it was Lonnie Manella who was directing the recording session. Actually, I have a really cool anecdote about that because we had like a day to record all of it, which was, or maybe two. It was way too short for the sheer amount of content, but so it actually very fittingly sounds like a B movie, but I'm not entirely sure it was intentional. But at some point, and it was like, we're like an hour away from finishing the thing. And suddenly, like, I go, hang on. And I was mind you, I was the only foreigner in there. So I still had this, a bit of a stronger, even probably German accent a little bit and stuff. So my character must sound weird to most people. And I'm sort of, and I go like, hang on a second. For the last few hours, we've been talking, because there was this sequence in the game where you were, there was this like little factory or like a warehouse or something. And we talked, we need to, I saw something on the belt conveyors. Everyone was saying, and I was like, did you see that? It was like, we have to put that on, put that on the belt conveyors. And at some point, I just go like, hang on a second, guys. What is a belt conveyor? I go like, oh, and we all realized that it should have been conveyor belts all along.
God.
And then suddenly, every single line that had any mention of conveyor belts, of which there were many, had to be re-recorded, but we no longer had the context of whatever line that was in. So I'm sure all conveyor belt lines in the game must sound completely insane, or even more bizarre compared to the others. So it was hilarious. It was hilarious, but I loved it, and I cared about Nishigaki-san and his passion and all his team very dearly. I think they were crazy cool people. So and the game is cult for a reason.
Yeah, you answered like several questions I already had about the making of it. Like, I didn't even know you were there from the start. Like that is the most amazing part, is that you're in there, like you're intended to be in there. Now it's not just some kind of like weird trick for localizing it or anything.
Yeah, it could have been. No, the only reason I was doing any game journalism to begin with, I sort of stumbled into it because I thought I wouldn't be able to stay in New York because I was broke and NYU was so ridiculously expensive, and because I was so stressed about it, I went into the basement where the computers were, and like the sort of dorm hall, like in the residence hall I was in, and I sort of, I had some nostalgia for just playing a video game, just being a kid again, and not having all this pressure suddenly of being like an 18-year-old kid in one of the world's biggest cities, like thousands of miles away from my parents. And any sort of safety net. And so I went and I was reading this German video game magazine, and I just sent them a hello via their website. Hey, like, just wanted to say, like, I miss getting the magazine every month. I wish I could still get it, but I'm in New York now. And they said, hey, we're looking for a U.S. correspondent. So that's how that came about. It was completely by chance. And then my first article for them was a preview again of a game, because I was just interested in the creative process, because I just wanted to make stuff. I wasn't interested in criticizing the final product. And as a matter of fact, I've never written a review in my life, because I'm not interested in criticizing years of other people's work, which I had no insight into, and I have no idea what the factors were involved. No, not to mention that I have no idea. I had no idea how to make a video game at the time. So how was I in the right to criticize? And so I made. But then it was a game that was being worked on by a bunch of former Shiny Entertainment guys, and I always loved the Shiny games. I thought it was a fascinating group of people between Earthworm Jim and then they got the sort of the Scandinavian guys over to do Messiah, which was a crazy cool concept. Not the best game ever, but it was a brilliantly ambitious title. And then a bunch of like those guys left and founded Planet Moon Studios. And I just wanted to know what they were up to, and they were working on a game called Giants. And I sort of through ICQ, which is a precursor to all the chat systems that we have now, I wrangled my way into to talk to the team and started talking to a guy, Tim Williams, who's since then worked on at Telltale Games and a bunch of other cool companies as a writer, a game writer, and he sort of opened up to me and told me that they were working on this game called Giants, and eventually they gave me an exclusive preview of this game, and that then landed me, brought me to the attention of Next Gen magazine and the US magazines, because they themselves hadn't even broken the game yet, so to speak. So yeah, it was just my passion for this stuff and wanting to have an insight into the creative process, which I still am completely obsessed by. I'm not interested in criticizing the final product. I'm more interested in making stuff, and that's what I was specializing in. It's like talking to people about how they were making stuff, and I thought that not enough of that was being done in game magazines at the time. Everyone was always talking about the final product, and I want to talk about the people and their thought processes behind the stuff. Yeah.
And is that kind of what led you to making that creation documentary?
Yeah, I mean, that was actually, I was in LA. I just stopped. That was after Minority Report and after working from Activision, which I did not enjoy, I have to say. And that was at a time where game companies still felt very much like they were servicing, or ultimately that they were underneath or beneath Hollywood, and that they were ultimately making licensed titles. And I disagreed with that profoundly, because I knew that the era of that was over, and there was no communication between Activision and the film studios, not to mention the filmmakers. And so I was a bit of a rebel within Treyarch, which is a very different company now. And as a young
Duty now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they're a whole different company now with whole different people. So I would say they're Treyarch by name only. And so I just sort of started bringing in people from the movie, which people within Treyarch and Activision were not particularly pleased with, because suddenly I imagine they probably could have put a bit of doubt in some of the work that had already been done, because it had nothing to do with what the film looked like or was about. But I resented that. I thought it was crazy to work on such great source material, as the book especially. I'm not sure that the movie ultimately is as good as Philip K. Dick's story was, and But I was frustrated by the fact that we weren't actually working cohesively and in unity with the creatives behind the movie. And if we had done so, then the game would have actually had something to do with the film. And been better.
It has vague ties.
Well, I think it's a bit silly for a game that's based on a movie which is all about a future where we can predict crimes, for the main gameplay to be throwing guys out of windows and breaking their necks every 2 seconds.
Flying in a jetpack, of course.
That, but I'm very proud to say, was a rebellious edition that I was a part of. Because it was just me and 2 junior programmers who decided to steal some code from the Spider-Man game that was being made at the same time and show them that we could actually make jetpack levels. Because the game was actually about the movie is about running away, which later on, sure enough, their tagline was "Everybody runs."
Right.
So, we felt the game should be about running rather than fighting. It should be about escaping stuff. So that's why the jetpack levels are, to this day, I think the only good thing in the game, in my view. But yeah, unfortunately, my rebellious spirit was not what they wanted. Actually, fortunately, because I was very miserable in this cubicle space. It sort of felt like it was the sort of video game equivalent to Office Space, the movie, and I felt very much trapped in there. But I wish I'd been on the Spider-Man team, which was brilliant, of course, and they did great work. And I still have a few dear friends who worked on that game to this day, and of course they created something incredible. Now the new Insomniac game is the soaring through through buildings and flying through buildings feeling is ultimately not much improved, in my view, to from what they did on far inferior hardware back then.
I feel like I could just talk about this for hours with you because there's so many just interesting things from that era. Just like that Minority Report game is hard. I couldn't beat it. Like I struggled with it very much. And with Spider-Man, I beat as a kid like several times. I loved that game as a kid. But like, okay, let's jump forward a little bit because, like I said, we could just talk about hours just on this stuff alone. After like Minority Report, I feel like you kind of spun off a little bit. You worked on like film scripts I was hearing about. You did the creation documentary. You started working on short films a few years later. What was that process like of just expanding beyond that?
Well, I mean, my biggest love was writing my own scripts and ultimately wanted to make movies with, and so I really wanted to make films and hopefully make films that will be big enough in scope and concept that I can work with very talented game makers to make games at the same time, based on those or set in those worlds, etc. So that was my sort of big ambition while I was in LA, and I didn't, of course, in my sort of naive early 20s, realize how much of a megalomaniac I must have come across as, because who was I? Actually, at some point, Jerry Bruckheimer believed that I was, and his company believed that I was. Being silly. I mean, what don't you think that you're aiming for too much at once and being a big megalomaniac, which is hilarious because now, of course, Jerry Bruckheimer advises as a chair at, I think, is it ZeniMax or whatever, one of those companies. But back then it was inconceivable for someone to want to make games and movies at the same time, and for us to think of them as co-inhabiting the same space and the same screens and the same consumers, which of course now it's swung very much. The pendulum is swung very much the other way, and I think films will be lucky to capture and captivate audiences as much as the most popular games are doing. So so that was my but I wanted to make but movies. I knew that I could make them. I could have as much control over them as more control over them with games, because I can program, and the indie market as we know it today didn't exist yet. So it was well before the iPhone, which ultimately for a short period of time invigorated independent development, and then of course we had PlayStation Portable and others sort of gradually opening up, and with Sony PlayStation especially allowing independent developers to actually release smaller titles and with a more artistic approach and stuff. But that didn't quite exist yet. We didn't feel like we could do that yet. Make small indies, about something. And so film was the thing that I was focusing on the most, and it takes a long time to break through. And so I was, while I was writing things like Conan the Barbarian prequels and other things that were sort of gradually stuck in development hell in Hollywood. So I wrote quite a lot of stuff, which people don't know about. And it hasn't seen the light of day. I gradually started making my own shorts and then my own content, and I met my amazing wife, and then we started doing theater together, and then we've made our first feature together since, and now we're all off to up and away to doing our next features and other stuff. So yeah, it's a journey,
So let me ask you this. What would you rather talk about? Would you rather talk about Testudo, or would you rather talk about Alone in the Dark?
Well, Testudo was just a little shorter, made for €500, and it was a cool experience. It was like I did everything that one never wants to do as a filmmaker, as a young filmmaker, especially as a beginner, is to do scenes mostly in the car, work with kids and with animals, and of course I did 3 of them once. But it did very well. It went to a bunch of festivals, got the attention of a lot of great people, and who then become mentors for life, and it gave me the confidence that I could do it, and so I've been sort of making bigger and better stories hopefully since. But Alone in the Dark, that was right after I left Activision, and for those who don't know what Alone in the Dark is, it is Alone in the Dark is is the first ever horror survival game franchise that predates Resident Evil by quite a lot of years. And it was an incredible game that I absolutely adored as a kid, and created by a guy called Frédéric Rénal, who actually later on would make Toy Commander for Dreamcast.
Wow, the same person?
Yes. And
wow.
Yeah, and then he did Little Big Planet as well, which is brilliant. So yeah, he's which we might have made before Toy. Yeah, he did it before Toy Commander. Well, that was a great game as well. Not Little Big Planet, Little Big Adventure. Sorry, Little Big Adventure, which was a great down sort of RPG-ish game. And yes, and so I was broke in LA, and I was really afraid because I was about to get fired from Activision for being a rebel, and which I kind of wanted because then I get 3 months severance, which I wouldn't have gotten if I'd quit. So I was, I think, in my sort of silly rebellious stage, behaving in as absurd way possible, so I could finally no longer work in cubicle hell. And so I went to this weird party with a friend of mine in Marina del Rey, and which we crashed, of course. And there were a bunch of people there and drinking and whatever. And this weird guy came up to me and said, "Hey, are you staring at my wife?" I'm like, no. And I saw who he was looking at, and I certainly was not staring at her, which I think he picked up. He's like, "Are you saying my wife is ugly?" And I'm like, no. She's really very attractive, sir.
It's like the classic sitcom scenario almost.
Completely, yes. And this guy then said finally that my name is Sales, Dan Sales. I'm in film sales. And I thought he was kidding, but he was actually a guy called Sales who was selling films. And he was selling films for a new client, a great new up-and-coming future star filmmaker who's going to take over Hollywood, called Uwe Boll. And Uwe Boll was still working in post-production on a film based on House of the Dead, which was, of course, a long-running Sega arcade and also later on Dreamcast franchise, where you just basically point and shoot duck hunt with zombies, basically. And so he decided to turn a thing that has no story, it's just a bunch of zombies coming at you, into a film. So that should have been the first red flag. I kind of knew the whole thing was silly, but he said that this guy is now going to release the biggest ever hit ever. It's going to be bigger than the Resident Evil movie. And after that, he needs to make another video game because he has a firm fund in Germany, and their specialty will be adapting video games into movies. And since I just overheard you talking about games with your friend there, maybe you have an idea, kiddo. And if you could find him a game, I'll give you a finder's fee. So he said, whatever deal you make, you get 10% of that deal. So I didn't have to think long. I just thought, he mentioned Resident Evil, the game that I think was pretty much the, coolest horror franchise before that was Alone in the Dark. So someone should make a movie out of that. And since I know Frédéric, the creator of it, I'm going to contact him. He no longer had anything to do with Alone in the Dark because the game had since been taken over by Infogrames and later on Atari, and had a different development team in Paris. So eventually I got in touch with them, and then I indeed made that deal happen. I've never made a deal happen for anyone before that. Wow. And basically, for doing jack shit, I got a year's something that was bigger than my salary, my yearly salary at Activision, in a couple of days. And then that was the extent of my involvement with Alone in the Dark.
So it all came down just like a suggestion you made, just like, hey, get this one.
No, I made the contact. Okay. I sent the emails around. I didn't broker the deal, but I established the deal. I didn't negotiate the price. I left that to them because they wanted to do that. And then not that I would have known what to ask for, but anyway. And they stuck to their word, and they gave me 10%. And then later on, when I saw what a quote unquote interesting movie this would turn into, I sort of insisted on not being credited on it because I asked, but I don't think I asked forcefully enough, because then not only did I get that associate producer credit on what to this day is known as probably one of the worst things ever made. And I have to say, this is not because Rotten Tomatoes history is being rewritten by new bloggers. No, that was indeed a horrendous film. And I know I'm sort of breaking with what I said earlier. I don't like to criticize things, but since I was at least by name involved with it, I'm allowed. And then it came out indeed, and there you have it. And also on the director's commentary on the DVD. Not that anyone can buy that now, but you can find it in a sort of a bargain bin somewhere.
I have it right here with me.
Oh, thank you so much. The first thing that Uwe Boll says on it, the reason this film exists is because a young filmmaker in LA called Jörg Tittel, he mispronounced my last name, and I was hiding behind the couch when I was watching that. But there you go. That's my involvement with On the Dog. It's hilarious though, because anyone who has the balls to hire Tara Reid to play scientist is somewhere a genius, I think, because I mean, who else would think of that?
I mean, anybody could be the right person for the right role in the right context, really, you know?
Yes.
Give Tara Reid a scientist to like Paul Thomas Anderson. I'm sure you can make it work.
I don't know, man. I think Paul. I know that he did something with Adam Sandler that no one else has gotten out of him, but I think that he would also draw the line somewhere.
I just can't get over the fact that like you just happen to know the guy who made Alone in the Dark, and that the deal just happens, and you could have suggested anything almost, and it would have been the same. No,
but Alone in the Dark really deserved to have a film made out of it. I mean, I thought if nothing else, just to prove all the people that just make all this silly money with the Resident Evil films that have nothing to do with the game, as far as I'm concerned, to show them that they weren't first. There was something before that. But no, I mean, I'd known Frederic for years. I actually did the first preview of Toy Commander for Official Dreamcast magazine, because I admired him so much for the games that he'd made in the past. So I really went out of my way to find out what he was working on next, and it happened to be a Dreamcast exclusive. So I feel really bad that ultimately I have, and I told him that, and he doesn't care because to him it's unrelated, and the game again was no longer his franchise because Infogrames had usurped it. But he felt that, I felt I'd done a major disservice to his legacy by having this interesting movie made out of it.
Okay, so fast forwarding a little bit, you have made more recent things like Ricky Rouse Has a Gun and The White King.
Yeah.
Both very different pieces of media compared to what you've made before. Both actually yes and no. Like, if you look at Ricky Rouse, I see connections to Illbleed very centrally.
That's really interesting. You know what? I only just realized that when you were talking about the sort of messed up Toy Story parallels in Illbleed, and I genuinely, not to this day, have I made that parallel. Have I understood that that thing actually profoundly inspired me somewhere? It's really interesting. I mean, Ricky Rouse is set in a Chinese knockoff Disneyland, and but to me, it was a response to actually getting ripped off by a couple of people in LA and Hollywood, whose names I shall not mention, but big ones, big people. And I'd written an original spec script, and they ripped it off and turned it into something with big stars who I personally had suggested for it, and even stole my creative team and my VFX people and everything. It was really hard. So it really kind of knocked me down for a bit. And when it did, I realized that, wow, like Hollywood, which is so obsessed with intellectual property and so obsessed with copyright and so obsessed with, like accusing China of stealing their precious intellectual property, they themselves are the biggest culprits, not only because they themselves steal from vulnerable artists who are trying to get their work seen and then just steal their ideas, but also because they themselves are ripping themselves off by making countless sequels, prequels, remakes, she-makes, etc. And so it was that sort of like really led me to create this thing. So it came perhaps from a sort of hurt and angry place, but I ultimately turned it into something which I hope is joyful, funny, and exciting.
And you're making a movie out of it, potentially?
Yes, we are making a movie out of it. If all goes well, we'll be filming later this year. It has a pretty hefty budget, and we're working with some amazing people on it, who I can't announce until Cannes, but they're, one of the biggest.
Oh, wow, you're going to Cannes with that? Oh, that's amazing.
We'll be announced at Cannes Market this year, and it's with the biggest, possibly the biggest sales company in the world, and incredible talent behind it, and we'll be filming it in Taiwan. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. But yeah, so I'm really, really psyched about it. It's been an absolute labor of love, but the film is a very different. Well, it's the same in spirit and the same in concept, but it's very, very different from the graphic novel. It's evolved massively since, and I'm very, very, very proud of the graphic novel. But it was a thing of its time and for its time, because it was a response also to America, to Bush's America at the time. And now we're living in a very different world, possibly even darker world than we were back then. So the film is an even angrier, but an even more joyful and even more rebellious and punk-spirited film than the graphic novel was.
And so, talking about films, you also made a film called The White King, which, would you say that kind of like helped push this Ricky Rouse movie to the fore, almost?
Well, only if only in the fact that we proved that my wife and I, we have a production company together with a guy called Phil Munger, who's an amazing American man, and so it's the three of us, and he's based in New York, we're in London, and but we if only to prove that, to show the world that we can make a feature. It's not only a feature that is made, but also sold to numerous territories, that made its money back, that it had really lovely reviews, that went to a bunch of festivals and stuff. So we're very proud of it. It was very, very tough to make and on a shoestring, but it doesn't look like it, I hope. And yeah, that's The White King. It's not a very happy movie.
My first thought was Ivan's childhood. I don't know why.
What was your first thought? Sorry, it was breaking up.
The film Ivan's Childhood.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
It's not that dark, but I could feel the connections, especially with the book.
Yeah, well, it's. I mean, it is based on a book. It's based on a book, The White King, by Jörg Tittel, which is actually very deeply rooted in Romania in the 80s under communism. And we felt that the story had a very universal feel to it, and we felt that with what was happening in the world, we saw that there were some tides, rising tides and populist tides and strange things forming, and we couldn't quite put our finger on it, but it was definitely in the air about 4 years ago when we started developing it, and then we decided to set it in a country that isn't specified in the near future. It could be anywhere, any place. It could be in the States, it could be in Europe. And so we made this thing, and then we had our premiere at Edinburgh Film Festival, and that was 3 days before the UK voted to leave the European Union and decide to be a country behind closed borders, which was, I have to say, the most depressing premiere imaginable, because we felt like shit. What have we done? We've kind of predicted it in a way, and now we're going to have to live in it. We've spent 4 years making this, or trying to get it off the ground to finally filming, and now we're going to have to live in this world. And so to us, it felt very sort of strangely anticlimactic to release a film that was ultimately so close to home.
I know.
No, go ahead.
I know you have to run. I just want to know if you want to go down like some of what you're working on right now, like what you got in the future. I know you talked about a few things before.
Yeah, no, besides Ricky Rouse, I'm producing a film that my wife Alex will be directing, which we'll also be announcing very soon, and we'll be working on that with the team behind Loving Vincent, the Van Gogh animated film.
Oh wow!
Our dear friend Hugh Walchman and his people. And then we are also, there's a video game that I've been sort of working on the side with a bunch of former Rockstar leads, Rockstar North guys, and it's going to be something else. And it's a narrative first-person game, and that's all I'll say for now. But if all goes well in the next few weeks, it will be announced, depending on who we end up with on it on the publishing side. But we're literally finalizing the first sort of things that the world will see in the coming days. So it's very exciting. It's just something that has been a sort of little passion project on the side. Everyone has been working in their free time on it, and it's only now that we are getting money in to do the actual proper development on it. So it's been very much a side project, which is now becoming one of my main obsessions and occupations. But like everything, it always takes longer than you'd like. But when it finally happens, it's a joy. And it's a film that is, I guess closer to Ricky Rouse in tone, perhaps, because it is quite satirical. Mm-hmm. but it's also about something, and it's also quite political, and it's fun. It's really fun, and but at the same time quite dark, and hopefully also very moving. So hopefully we can.
Sounds incredible.
There are so many fucking great games that are being made, and that have been released in the last few years that I've enjoyed possibly more than any film. Whether it was Firewatch or Papers, Please, or in recent months, what can I think of? Greece has been a gorgeous experience. I mean, it didn't emotionally affect me as much as I would have liked, but I think it's a stunning thing. A game from a team in Barcelona. There's so much. I've loved playing Bad North, which I think is a great game. If you want to play something really cool on Switch, Bad North is highly recommended. There's so much cool, unique games made by small teams that feel so entirely unique and so and that affect you deeply, and through all sorts of different kinds of gameplay styles. I want to be a part of that, because I think it's you get to be more creative and more unhinged in games than you can in film, for sure, at the moment.
Right. Sounds almost like Wolfenstein, what you're describing.
Yeah, what the game that I'm making.
Yeah, the way you're describing almost sounds like the new Wolfenstein games, and I really enjoyed those.
Yeah, I did too. You know what? The Wolfenstein games for me are too. It's too oppressive and too brutal, and it's too nasty. And I just feel like, I just. I don't object to violence. I find it so fucking stressful. Like it's just stressful. I don't like to be that stressed. I like, to have a feeling of anxiety and dread and stuff is one thing, but for everything to want to fucking kill your ass every 2 seconds and also to make a sort of cartoon of Nazis and stuff. Within the sort of actual historical context of that as well. Is to me is just like, oh dude, it's I think it's bad enough for us to have actual real Nazis rising in the world right now, which I don't find particularly entertaining. I find it really really very, very scary. So for me, Wolfenstein was I think it's an incredibly made game and so beautifully produced, and it's just a fantastic achievement. It's just too nasty. Like, I personally like to separate myself a step at least, which, like playing the new Doom for me, I could do because it was, because it wasn't that in my face. I didn't want to fucking be in a world of Nazis for that long. I can't do it.
I totally understand.
I can't do it. And that's part of the thing with the White King. Is like we made something that was so close to home, and it felt so real, ultimately, to me anyway, that I just said, like, oh God, and I want people to be able to escape at least a little bit. That's not to say that I don't want them to think about the world they're in, and also hopefully be inspired to make a difference and change things for the better and challenge the system that they live and work in. For sure, absolutely, that's what all my work is definitely about. But I also feel that at the same time, we need to escape into something. We need to. I think I want to make people to feel good while they also feel empowered and inspired to change stuff. And I think it's important.
That's a great mission statement. That's honestly great. If people want to find out where you are, your work, where should they go?
Well, I mean, I've kind of like shut down my Twitter account, although I might. The one thing I didn't mention is we have a little Brexit comedy coming out, a comedy about Brexit or about the world after Brexit that my wife and I just co-directed, and we're putting the finishing touches on, and that will be launching in March. So I think at that point I'll probably reopen my Twitter account. But yeah, oiffy.com, which is our production company, is oiffy, which is OIFFY.com. And I guess you can find me on sort of Instagram. I guess it's the only social media account I haven't shut down. Not because I said anything nasty about either gay people or anyone else in the past. I never have. Hi, Kevin Hart. But I just couldn't be bothered anymore with the bullshit. But I might exclusively talk about sort of projects that are coming out on it. I just felt like we were all oversharing and ultimately saying nothing at the moment in the world, and especially as it's so deprived of context. that I'd rather be saying it through my work than just unleash the entire kitchen sink on the world for anyone to listen. I think there's no point. My job is not to be a sort of a Twitterer, but it is to be a storyteller. And I think I'd do that a better service to that with, long form, either films or games or theater or whatever medium might attract me down the road. So, just, you can find me online and I'm pretty easy to communicate with. So, anyone wants to.
I can attest to that, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I ignore lots of things as well, don't get me wrong. But it's never really truly personal. It's just, life is
hard. A lot of things going on.
Well, it's not hard. It's a precious thing, and I don't like to waste it on bullshit. And there's quite a lot of it out there. And I think Twitter and Facebook are very much a good example of bullshit. So, in my view, I think it has done more harm to society than it has done good. And again, I'll be a hypocrite about it and probably promote some of my fucking work down the road, but I will certainly not be sharing every little thought and grievance on it as I used to.
So that's oifi.com. My name is Don Michikoku. You can find me here at Windmill Studios or on Twitter, funny enough, at DACICHOCKI. And I think that'll do it for now. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
That is Jörg Tittel. I think I pronounced it right, yeah?
Yeah. And talk soon.
I hope so. You talk soon. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.